My wife only wants to be with her family.
Those words hit me harder than any slap. I was standing in the hallway of the maternity hospital in New York City, clutching a bag with a baby blanket I had knitted for 3 months. Every stitch was made with love, imagining how I would wrap my grandson in it. And now my own son looked at me as if I were a stranger who had wandered into the wrong room. Andrew didn't even invite me inside. He stepped into the hall and closed the door behind him as if he were protecting his new family from some kind of threat. For me, I handed him the bag with the blanket. I knitted it for 3 months, I said. For Matthew. He took the bag without even looking inside. Thanks, Mom. But now isn't a good time. Victoria is exhausted after giving birth. He wants some quiet. Only the closest people. The closest. I repeated. And who am I then? He looked away. Don't start. Just give us a few days. We'll call you. I had traveled to New York City all night. I shook in that stuffy bus, unable to close my eyes because I couldn't wait to see my grandson. My first and only grandson. I was 52 and I had dreamed of this day ever since Andrew told me Victoria was pregnant. And now I was standing in the hospital hallway, feeling like a beggar at a closed door. Can I at least take one quick look at him? I asked. 1 minute. Andrew shook his head. Victoria is against it. She's overwhelmed. She doesn't want to see strangers right now. Strangers. He called me a stranger. You know what's terrifying? I didn't even get angry. I just nodded, turned around and walked toward the exit. Like a beaten dog. 28 years I gave that boy. I worked 2 jobs, slept too little, ate too little, denied myself everything so he could have everything. And now I was thrown out of the hospital like some annoying relative. But back then I didn't know this story was only beginning. And what happened next neither my son nor his precious wife could have ever imagined. And before we continue, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. It's important for us to know where our stories reach. Now let me tell you everything from the very beginning. Because to understand how I ended up in that hallway, you need to know what I went through for my son. I grew up in a small town outside Pittsburgh in an ordinary family. My mom worked at a textile plant, my dad at a manufacturing plant. Nothing special, no wealth, but the house was always warm and filled with the smell of pies. I met Robert when I was 19. He worked at a hardware store. I came in to buy a bucket and he looked at me and smiled. Which one do you need, for flowers or for cleaning? He asked. For cleaning, I guess, I mumbled. Then you should take this one, it's sturdier. And for flowers I'd recommend another one, smaller and prettier. I laughed because I had never seen anyone treat buckets so seriously. And he looked at me with those kind eyes and kept smiling. I walked out of that store with a bucket, and his phone number. We got married a year later. The wedding was modest, just a small dinner at a cafe with our families. I sewed my dress myself from a piece of fabric my mother had saved for a special occasion. At the wedding my mother pulled me aside. Helen, remember, she said quietly. Family is work. Every day, no days off. But if you love, it's worth it. I nodded back then, not really understanding her words. I understood them only years later. For the first years we lived with his parents in a tiny room. Later we saved enough for our own place. A small 1-bedroom on the outskirts. But it was ours. And then Andrew was born. When I first saw his wrinkled little face, I cried from happiness. Robert stood beside me, his hands trembling when he picked up his son for the first time. Helen, look at him, he whispered. He's perfect. Of course he's perfect, I laughed through tears. He's ours. With our son, life changed completely. Everything began to revolve around this tiny human. In the evenings, Robert would put Andrew on his shoulders and run around the apartment. Dad, faster, faster. Andrew would laugh. And Robert would gallop through the hallway like a horse until I started scolding him that the downstairs neighbors would complain again. Those were golden years. Andrew grew up smart. At 5 he was reading, at 7 he was solving 3rd-grade problems. One day he came home from school, sat at the table and announced, Mom, Dad, when I grow up I'll build you a huge house. With a pool and a garden. Robert ruffled his hair. Deal, Robert said, ruffling Andrew's hair. But make sure the pool is heated. Your mom is always freezing. I looked at the two of them and thought, This was the meaning of my life. This was what made every morning worth waking up for. If only I had known how all of this would end. Andrew was 15 when it happened. Just a regular Tuesday. Robert left for work as usual, kissing me on the cheek. "I'll bring your favorite pastries tonight," he said at the door. "From that bakery on the corner." "All right, just don't forget like last time," I replied. He laughed and walked out. I didn't even say I loved him. I just nodded and went back to washing the dishes. A few hours later the hospital called. "Are you Helen Baker?" a woman asked. "You need to come. Your husband." And that was it. My world collapsed. A massive heart attack. They couldn't save him. My Robert died right there in his hardware store, surrounded by the buckets and shovels he loved selling. Stay with this story till the end, because what happened next turned everything upside down. And you definitely won't expect the final twist. The first days after Robert's death are a blur. People came, said things, I nodded and signed whatever they brought. The funeral, the wake, the condolences, everything melted into one gray smear. The only thing I remember clearly is Andrew's face. My 15-year-old son sat in the corner, staring at one spot. He didn't cry. Not once. For all those days I didn't see a single tear from him, and that scared me even more. When everyone left and we were finally alone, he lifted his eyes to mine. "Mom, what's going to happen to us now?" he asked quietly. I sat beside him and hugged him. "We'll manage, son. I'll take care of everything. You don't need to worry." I lied. I had no idea how we would manage. A week after the funeral, I opened the folder Robert kept in the closet. And that's when the ground disappeared from under my feet. A loan for expanding the store, $7,000. Debt to suppliers, $5,000. Unpaid warehouse rent, $1,500. And that didn't even include utilities. Almost $14,000. To me it felt like an impossible sum. Robert never told me about the business problems. He never liked burdening me with such things. And now he was gone and the entire weight crashed onto me. The next day a man came, introduced himself as Mr. Cole, said he'd had his eye on Robert's store for a while. "Helen, I know this is hard," he began. "But let's be honest. You won't be able to handle this business. And I'm ready to buy the store right now." "For how much?" I asked. $3,000. I knew the store was worth at least twice that. Robert had poured his soul into it. He'd hammered every shelf with his own hands. "That's too little," I said. He spread his hands. "Helen, you understand you have debts, creditors. If they start seizing property, you won't get anything at all. This way you'll at least get something." He was right. And he knew it. I signed the papers 3 days later. That money was enough to cover the main debts. But I still needed something to live on. I started looking for a job. I was 44, which employers already saw as an older candidate. No college degree, no special skills. I had been a homemaker for 20 years. After 2 weeks of searching, I went to an interview at a dental clinic. The head of the clinic, a strict woman in a white coat, looked at me over her glasses. "The work is hard," she said. "The shift starts at 5 in the morning and ends at 9 in the morning. Floors, restrooms, offices. Think you can handle it?" "I can," I answered. "We don't pay much. $1,600 a month." $1,600. Not even enough to cover utilities. "I agree," I said. It still wasn't enough. I kept looking and found a second job, as an administrator at a private medical center across town. There I worked from 2 in the afternoon until 10 at night. My day looked like this. Waking up at 4 in the morning, getting to the clinic, 4 hours of cleaning. Then home, making breakfast for Andrew, checking if everything was okay. A short nap, 2 hours at most. Then back on the road and behind the reception desk until late evening. I returned home around 11 at night, exhausted. That went on for months. Then for years. One evening Andrew met me at the door. I was barely standing. That day I had to clean after renovations and pulled a muscle in my back. "Mom, enough," he said. "I can't watch this. I'll drop school and start working." "No," I answered firmly. "But you're destroying yourself. I'm grown, I can handle it." I took his shoulders and looked him in the eyes. "Andrew, listen to me. Your job right now is studying. You need to get an education and a real profession. That is the only thing I'm asking you for. And you? He asked. I'll manage. Don't worry about me. He hugged me then, tightly like he used to when he was little. And I felt him trembling, from anger or helplessness I couldn't tell. From that day on he changed. He stopped going out with friends and buried himself in books. He came home from school and sat down to study right away. His teachers called me and said he was one of the best students in the class. One evening I came home later than usual. The bus had broken down and I had to wait for the next one. I opened the door and saw Andrew sitting at the table, surrounded by big sheets of paper. What's that? I asked. He lifted his head. His eyes were shining. Mom, I've decided. I want to be a civil engineer. I want to design houses and bridges. I walked closer. On the table were drawings, lines, diagrams, calculations. I didn't understand any of it. This will be a bridge, he explained. And this is a residential building. See, these are the support structures and here. He talked and I watched him and saw Robert. His eyes burned the same way Robert's did when he spoke about his plans for the store. That's wonderful, son, I said. You will definitely become an engineer. In that moment I understood. My son knew what he wanted from life. And I would do everything to help him achieve it. Every dollar I earned went to Andrew. Books, textbooks, exam preparation courses. I bought nothing for myself. Wore the same clothes for years. Sometimes, when things were especially hard, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried. Quietly so Andrew wouldn't hear. Then I washed my face and told myself, just a little longer. Just a bit more and it will get easier. I believed that. I believed that once my son graduated and stood on his own feet, our life would finally change. When Andrew passed his final school exams with excellent marks, I cried from happiness. He applied to the University of Pittsburgh for the civil engineering program. The competition was huge, 7 applicants for 1 spot. I barely slept for several nights while waiting for the results. I prayed even though I had never been particularly religious. I simply didn't know any other way to survive the waiting. At last he called. His voice was trembling. Mom, I got in. Tuition free. I grabbed the wall so I wouldn't collapse. My legs just gave out. Tears streamed down my face and I couldn't get a word out, just sobbed into the phone. Andrew got scared, asked what happened. And I finally managed to say that it was from happiness. That if his dad could see this, he'd burst with pride. My son, a university student. Everything had been worth it. His college years weren't easy. Andrew lived in a dorm because traveling from our small town outside Pittsburgh every day was impossible. A room for 4, a shared kitchen, a bathroom down the hall. But he never complained. I sent him money every month, not much, just what I could. He worked part-time in the evenings, unloading goods at a supermarket, handing out flyers. But he never gave up his studies. Every weekend I waited for his call. He told me about lectures, professors, projects. Once he called especially excited. Professor Williams praised him for an unusual solution in a bridge project. Andrew eagerly explained something about supports and load-bearing structures. I didn't understand half of it, but I listened with pleasure, just to hear his voice, to feel the joy and pride in every word. Sometimes he came home for the holidays. I cooked his favorite dishes: borscht, meat patties, hand pies with potatoes. We sat in the kitchen until late talking. In those moments I felt that all my sacrifices had not been in vain. In his 4th year he came home for winter break. I was feeding him borscht, glad he had gained a little weight. He had always been skinny as a stick. And suddenly he put down his spoon and said he needed to talk seriously. Everything inside me tightened. When children say that, you expect anything. He started slowly. There were more opportunities in New York City for civil engineers. Higher salaries, more interesting projects. Many of his classmates were planning to move to the city after graduation. And he was thinking about it too. New York City. The word fell between us like a stone. I said nothing. New York was far. Too far. A whole night on a bus. A completely different life. But I understood that he was right. In our town, the best he could hope for was a job in a small construction firm for pennies. And he was capable of much more. Andrew looked at me cautiously, waiting for my reaction. Maybe he thought I would start begging him to stay, crying, guilt-tripping him. But I told him to go. It was his chance and he shouldn't waste it. His face lit up. He jumped up, hugged me tightly, like when he was a child, and began promising that he would call every day, that he would bring me to New York City once he got on his feet, that we would live together again and I would finally be able to rest. I nodded and believed every word. After graduation, Andrew moved to New York City. At first it was difficult. He lived in a rented room with 2 roommates and searched for work. He went to interviews, got rejected, tried again. I worried about him terribly but tried not to show it. I only asked carefully how he was doing, whether he needed money. After 2 months he got lucky. He was hired as an engineer at Urban Build Corporation. A large firm, a good salary, opportunities to grow. When he called with the news, his voice was ringing with happiness. He said he still couldn't believe that it was his office, his desk, his projects. I listened and cried, this time from joy. My boy had achieved what he had dreamed of. The first half year everything was wonderful. He called every day, sometimes twice. He told me about work, about colleagues, about New York City. He sent photos. His office, him at a construction site wearing a hard hat, the view from his rented apartment window. I saved every picture. Showed them to my coworkers, proud as ever. And then the calls became less frequent. At first I didn't pay attention. Of course he was busy. Work, projects, a new life. It was normal. I called him myself and asked how he was doing. He answered briefly, too much work, a project deadline, staying late. He promised to call back and didn't. Instead of daily calls he began calling every other day. Then twice a week. Then once a week. The conversations became shorter. Before we talked for an hour, now he wrapped everything up in 10 minutes. Yes, everything is fine. Yes, work is okay. Yes, Mom, will talk later. I tried asking about his life, his friends, his plans. He answered in 1 or 2 words. Sometimes I heard that he was doing something else while talking, typing on a keyboard, talking to someone in the room. One evening I called and he declined the call. Then a message came, busy, I'll call you back. He didn't. The next day I called again and asked why he hadn't called back. He said he got caught up in things and forgot. Asked if something urgent had happened. And I just wanted to talk. Just to hear his voice. I told myself it was normal. He was a grown man with his own life. I shouldn't control him or smother him with my love. I needed to let go. But my heart still hurt. A year passed. Then a year and a half. The calls dwindled to once every 2 weeks. Sometimes he forgot and I called him myself. He didn't pick up right away. His voice had changed, polite, distant. As if he were talking not to his mother, but to a distant relative he needed to maintain contact with out of courtesy. I felt I was losing my son. Slowly, drop by drop, but losing him. And I didn't understand why. And then he told me about Victoria. He mentioned Victoria casually. We were talking on the phone. One of those short conversations twice a month. I asked about work and suddenly he said he had met a girl. An architect working at the same company. Her name was Victoria. I was happy. Truly, without any hidden thoughts. My son was 26 and I had long hoped he would meet someone. That he would build a family, be happy. What mother doesn't dream about that? I started asking what she was like, where she was from, how they met. He answered sparsely, but I still learned a few things. Victoria was 2 years older. From a New York family. Her father was an architect, her mother taught at a university, her younger sister was studying medicine. Solid, educated people. Send me her picture, I asked. All right, I will. The photo came an hour later. The 2 of them at some corporate event. Victoria was beautiful, tall, slender, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun. She smiled, but only with her lips. Her eyes stayed serious, observant. I saved the picture and looked at it for a long time. Tried to understand what kind of person she was. But how can you tell from a single photo? A month later I suggested that Andrew come visit with Victoria. I wanted to meet her properly, set the table, talk like normal people. He said he would ask her. He called back 2 days later. Mom, Victoria is swamped with work. She can't come anytime soon. Maybe later. Later. That word again. All right, son, I said. Whenever she's free, you both come. Later never came. I decided to take the first step myself. I found Victoria on social media. She had a public page with photos of projects, trips, restaurants. A beautiful life of a successful New York woman. I wrote her a message. Nothing special, just introduced myself, said I was glad to meet her, that Andrew had told me a lot about her and that I would love to have them visit. She read it the same day. I saw the read mark. But there was no reply. Not that day, not the next, not even a week later. Maybe she didn't notice, I thought. Or forgot. Busy people do that. I wrote again after 10 days. Asked how they were, sent greetings. Read again. Silence again. That was the first warning sign. I didn't tell Andrew about it. I didn't want to seem like an intrusive mother meddling where she shouldn't. Complaining about a girl I didn't even know. But the bitter taste stayed. Months passed. From our rare conversations I gathered little bits of information. Victoria had moved in with him. They were working together on a large project. A residential complex on the outskirts of New York City. She had introduced him to her parents and they had welcomed him warmly. That was what hurt me the most. She had introduced him to her parents, and I still hadn't seen her even over video call. One day I couldn't hold it in anymore and asked directly, Andrew, when will we meet properly? I want to see Victoria, talk to her. He hesitated. Mom, she's very busy right now. Once we finish the project, we definitely will. They finished the project. Then another began. And another. The excuses never ended. For Victoria's birthday I decided to send a gift. I chose it carefully. I wanted to guess what she would like. I settled on a beautiful silk scarf with a delicate pattern. I spent almost my entire half-month salary, but I didn't regret it. I wanted to show that I accepted her, that I was glad she was with my son. The package arrived. I knew because I tracked the number. But no thank you followed. No call, no message, not even an emoji. I waited a week, then I couldn't take it anymore. Andrew, did Victoria get my gift? Yes, Mom, she did. Thank you. Did she like the scarf? Probably. She didn't say. And he changed the subject. That was the first time I felt something was truly wrong. Not just coldness. A wall. A solid concrete wall. Victoria didn't want to have anything to do with me. And for some reason Andrew accepted it. I tried to talk to my son seriously. I called in the evening when he was at home. Son, tell me honestly, is everything all right between you two? Maybe Victoria doesn't like something about me? Maybe I said or did something wrong. He sighed irritably. Mom, everything's fine. You're imagining things. But she doesn't answer my messages. She didn't thank me for the gift. We haven't even had a normal conversation. She's just that kind of person. Reserved. She doesn't like talking to people she doesn't know well. She needs time. People she doesn't know well. His mother, was someone she didn't know well. But I stayed quiet. I didn't want to push, didn't want to ruin our relationship. I hoped things would get better with time. They didn't. I noticed that Andrew defended Victoria more and more often. No matter what she did, she always had an explanation. Didn't respond to messages, she was busy. Didn't want to visit, she was tired. Didn't thank me for gifts, she forgot she had too much on her plate. Ignored her future mother-in-law. That was just her personality. But I saw something else. I saw a woman who was deliberately cutting my son off from his past. From me. One evening I called Andrew and Victoria picked up. Hello. Her voice was polite but cold like a winter wind. Hello, Victoria, I said cheerfully. This is Helen, Andrew's mother. How are you both doing? Fine. Is Andrew home? He's in the shower. He'll call you back. I tried to continue the conversation, asked about work, about their projects. She answered with single words. Fine. Yes. Good. And after a minute she hung up, said she had to go. Andrew called only the next day. Why so late? I asked. Victoria said she'd tell you. I forgot, he said. Got caught up. Was it something important? Forgot. My son forgot to call his mother back. Do you know what hurt the most? Not her coldness. I could live with that, after all we barely knew each other. What hurt the most was watching my son change. The Andrew I had raised would never have forgotten to call back. He would never have justified blatant rudeness. He would have noticed when I was hurt and defended me. But next to Victoria he became someone else. As if she were slowly rewriting him. Erasing everything connected to me and writing something new on top. And in this new version of my son, there was less and less space for me. When Andrew told me that he and Victoria had decided to get married, I felt a sharp pinch in my heart. Of course I was happy for him. But deep inside I knew, after the wedding everything would get even worse. And I wasn't wrong. The wedding was set for June. Andrew called 3 months in advance and said only a few sentences. They had filed the paperwork, the celebration would be in New York City at a restaurant, and I would receive an invitation. "Do you need my help?" I asked. "To organize anything, to prepare something?" "Thanks, Mom, but Victoria's mother is already handling everything." Victoria's mother. Of course. Mrs. Patterson had taken control, and I was left waiting for an invitation by mail. Like an ordinary guest. The invitation arrived 2 weeks later. A beautiful card with gold embossing. The names of the newlyweds, the date, the address of the restaurant. I held it in my hands and understood. That was all that was given to me. One line in the guest list. I started preparing long in advance. I wanted to look presentable. I saved money and bought a dress. Light gray, elegant, fitted. I spent half of my salary on it, but it mattered to me not to look like a poor relative from the provinces. Then I thought about the gift. I wanted something special, something meaningful. In the end I took out my grandmother's ring, gold, with a small sapphire. A family heirloom passed down through generations. My mother gave it to me on my wedding day and now I wanted to give it to my son's bride. I also added an envelope with money, everything I had managed to save over those 6 months. On the day of the wedding, I arrived in New York City on the morning train. My heart was pounding with excitement. Despite everything, I was happy for Andrew. I wanted this day to be joyful for him. The restaurant was luxurious. A huge hall, white tablecloths, crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers everywhere. I stopped at the entrance and realized that the decor alone must have cost a fortune. I wondered who paid, Victoria's parents or both families together. No one had asked me, of course. The guests were already arriving. Dressed up, lively, all knowing each other. I stood by the entrance looking for Andrew, but he wasn't there, probably getting ready in another room. A woman in an expensive beige suit approached me. Well-groomed, confident, perfectly styled hair. "Are you Helen?" "I'm Mrs. Patterson, Victoria's mother." "Nice to meet you," I said, extending my hand. "Finally we meet." She shook my hand, briefly, formally, and smiled somewhere past me. "Yes, pleasure to meet you. How was your trip?" "Good, thank you." "Wonderful. Excuse me, I need to greet other guests." And she left. That was the entirety of our introduction. The ceremony was supposed to start in 30 minutes. I looked for my seat. There were name cards on the tables. I walked along the first row. There sat Victoria's parents, her grandmother, some important-looking people. Around 15 of them. The second row, aunts, uncles, cousins from the bride's side. My name wasn't there. I walked further. And found my name card in the third row. Between some distant cousin of Victoria and one of Andrew's colleagues. The third row. The groom's mother, in the third row. I sat down and felt my cheeks burn. Shame, humiliation, hurt. Everything blended together. I looked around, maybe it was a mistake? But no. The seating was arranged by Mrs. Patterson, and she had made it perfectly clear where my place was in this hierarchy. The ceremony began. Music played, guests clapped. Andrew walked in, handsome in his suit, happy. Behind him came Victoria in a white dress with a long train, like a princess from a magazine. They walked past me. Andrew glanced at me, nodded. And that was it. He didn't even come over to hug me. During the ceremony I watched my son and remembered holding him in my arms. Reading him bedtime stories. Working 2 jobs so he could have a future. And now he was standing at the altar, putting a ring on another woman's finger. And I, to him now, was just a guest. One of many. Then came the banquet. I sat at my table almost alone. The people next to me were polite, but they had their own conversations, their own circles. The woman on my left was discussing a vacation in Italy with someone. The man on my right stared at his phone. And I watched the head table. I watched Mrs. Patterson hugging her daughter and crying from happiness. I watched Victoria's father shake Andrew's hand and call him his son. I watched everyone around them laughing, clinking glasses, giving toasts. One toast, another, a third. The bride's parents, the bride's friend, the groom's colleague. No one invited me to the microphone. The groom's mother, and not a single word the entire evening. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up and approached Andrew when he stepped away from the crowd of guests. "Son," I said quietly, "I want to congratulate you. Say a toast." He looked at me confused, then glanced toward Victoria. "Yes, Mom, of course. Just later, okay? We're busy with guests right now." Later never came. By the end of the evening I gave Andrew the envelope with the money and the little box with my grandmother's ring. He took them, said thank you, and handed them to Victoria. She opened the box, looked at the ring for a couple of seconds. "Cute," she said, and closed the box. "Cute. A family heirloom over 100 years old. The ring my grandmother and mother had worn at their weddings. Cute." I left on the last train. I sat by the dark window, tears running down my face, and didn't even try to stop them. The woman across from me looked at me with sympathy but didn't ask anything. Thank God for that. I had lost my son. Completely and irrevocably. He now belonged to another family, another woman. And there was no place for me there. After the wedding, the connection between us became thin as a spiderweb. He called once a month, sometimes even less. The conversations were short, formal, like a report to a supervisor. "Alive, healthy, work is fine. Bye." I stopped writing to Victoria. What was the point of knocking on a closed door? I stopped suggesting they visit. What was the point of asking to go somewhere I wasn't wanted? I just waited. Waited for the day my son would wake up and remember he had a mother. A year passed. Then a year and a half. Nothing changed. And then I accidentally found out that Victoria was pregnant. I was scrolling through social media and saw a photo, Andrew and Victoria, and in her hands an ultrasound picture. With a caption, "Soon there will be 3 of us." My heart stopped. Then started beating so hard I grabbed my chest. A grandchild. I was going to have a grandchild. I looked at that picture and couldn't hold back my tears. I had dreamed of this moment for so many years. I imagined holding a baby, singing lullabies, knitting tiny booties. And now it had come true. But the joy was immediately pierced by hurt. Why was I finding out from the internet? Along with everyone else? Why hadn't my son called and told me himself? I dialed his number. He didn't answer right away, and when he did, his voice was busy, businesslike. "Yes, Mom." "Andrew," I tried to speak calmly. "I saw online. Is Victoria pregnant?" "Oh yeah. I meant to tell you. 12 weeks already. 12 weeks. 3 months of silence. Congratulations, son," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I'm so happy for you both." "Thanks, Mom." "How is Victoria feeling? Does she need anything? I can come visit." "No, everything's fine. Her mom is here helping." "Her mom?" "Of course. Mrs. Patterson probably knew first. Probably visited every week, bought vitamins, went to appointments with her daughter." "All right," I said. "If you need anything, call me. Anytime." "Hey, Mom. I have to go, we'll talk later." And he hung up. Despite the coldness, I was happy. A grandchild. That was a miracle. A new little person, a continuation of the family. I imagined holding him, imagined him calling me grandma. Maybe with a baby things would change. Maybe Victoria would soften and we'd finally become a real family. With that hope, I began preparing. First, I took out my knitting needles and yarn. I decided to make a blanket, soft, warm, in a gentle blue color. I knitted every evening after work, when my eyes were already closing from exhaustion. Every stitch was made with love, imagining wrapping my grandson in it. At work, my coworker Melissa noticed I was smiling. "Helen, what happened? You're glowing." "A grandchild," I admitted. "My son and his wife are expecting a baby." "Congratulations," she said happily. "Your first." "My first and only." Melissa hugged me and asked about the due date, the name. I answered, feeling truly happy. Finally, something bright was appearing in my life. Besides the blanket, I bought gifts. I put aside a little from each paycheck and bought things: tiny shirts, little caps, rattles. I chose the best I could afford. I placed everything in a big box, imagining giving it to Victoria. I wrote her messages. Careful, unobtrusive ones. I asked how she was feeling, whether she was nauseous in the mornings, whether she was sleeping well. I told her that if she needed advice or help, I was always there. After all, I had been pregnant once too. I knew what it was like. She read my messages. The seam marks always appeared. But she never replied. Not a single word in all those months. I tried calling Andrew, but he was always busy. He'd pick up on the run, talk for 2 minutes, then say goodbye. I asked about Victoria, the pregnancy, the doctors. He answered briefly. Everything is fine. Everything is normal. Everything is under control. One day I couldn't stand it and asked directly, "Son, why doesn't Victoria answer me? I've been writing to her for months." He was silent for a moment. "Mom, she's in a difficult state right now. Hormones, mood swings. Don't take it personally. But I want to help. I want to be there. Mom, it's hard for her to talk right now. Later, after she gives birth, everything will be fine. Later." That cursed word again. The pregnancy was coming to an end. I learned the news from social media. Victoria posted photos of her growing belly, pictures from the baby shower her friends threw for her. I wasn't invited, of course. I saw Mrs. Patterson leaving comments under every post. Hearts, excited words, advice. And I was afraid to write anything. What if she ignored me publicly? It would be unbearably humiliating. 2 weeks before the due date, I called Andrew. "Son, I want to come. To help you in the first days. Cook, clean, take care of the baby." He hesitated. "Mom, I'll ask Victoria and call you back." He called back 2 days later. "Mom, Victoria says it's not necessary right now. Her mom will help. Maybe later." Later. When the baby turns a month old. A year. Start school? "All right," I said, trying not to show how much it hurt. "Then at least tell me when she goes into labor. Right away, okay? I don't want to find out from the internet." "Of course, Mom. I'll definitely call." I hung up and sat motionless for a long time. I looked at the box with gifts, at the finished blanket. I had made all of it with so much love. And they didn't need it. They didn't need me. But I still waited. Counted the days until the due date, checked my phone every hour. Went to sleep with my phone under my pillow, just in case they called during the night. The due date passed. Andrew didn't call. I waited 1 day, then 2, then 3. I dialed his number. Unavailable. I sent messages. No response. On the 4th day I couldn't take it anymore and opened Victoria's page. And I saw the photograph. She was lying in a hospital room, tired but happy. And in her arms, a newborn in a blue blanket. The caption read, "Meet Matthew. 7 pounds 21 inches. We're happy." There were already 300 comments under the post. Congratulations from friends, relatives, co-workers. Mrs. Patterson wrote, "My precious grandson. Grandma adores you." And I found out about my own grandchild from social media. Like a stranger. Like a random acquaintance. My phone slipped out of my hands. I sat on the floor in the clinic hallway. It was my morning shift and couldn't move. Tears streamed down my cheeks and I didn't even try to wipe them. So that's how it was. That's what I meant to my own son. I sat on that floor for 20 minutes. Then I got up, washed my face in the restroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Red eyes, swollen face. But inside, a decision was already forming. I would go. I would go to New York City and see my grandchild. I didn't care that I wasn't invited. Didn't care that Victoria didn't want it. That was my grandchild. My only grandchild. I had the right to see him. I asked for leave from work, explaining the situation to the supervisor. She looked at me with sympathy and let me go without questions. I went home, grabbed a bag, put the blanket inside and a few of the presents from the box. Not everything fit. And headed to the bus station. The next bus to New York City was leaving in 2 hours. I bought a ticket and sat to wait. My hands were shaking. Thoughts raced in my head. What I would say, how I would behave. Maybe I shouldn't go? Maybe I should wait until they invited me? Oh, enough waiting. I had been waiting my whole life. Waiting for Andrew to grow up, to graduate, to get on his feet. waiting for Victoria to soften, for our relationship to get better. And what was the result? I found out about my grandchild's birth from the internet. I wasn't going to wait anymore. The bus drove through the night. I couldn't close my eyes. I stared out the dark window and thought about how things could have been different. If Andrew had married another girl, someone kind, open. If I had been more persistent, hadn't allowed myself to be pushed aside. If only. But what was the point of thinking about it now? I arrived in New York City early in the morning. I found the hospital address online. Victoria had tagged the location in her post. I took the subway, then walked. I stood at the entrance and dialed Andrew's number. He answered after the fifth ring. Mom. His voice was sleepy, annoyed. Son, I'm in New York. I'm standing at the hospital entrance. I want to see my grandchild. Pause. You've what? I came. You didn't call, you didn't answer messages. I found out about Matthew's birth from the internet. Mom, I was busy. The delivery, the paperwork. Andrew, I understand. But I'm here. Can I come up? Another pause. I heard him talking to someone. Probably Victoria. Then he came back to the phone. Wait, I'll come down. He came down 10 minutes later. Exhausted, sleepless, but somehow glowing, the way new fathers look. Hi, Mom, he said. He didn't even hug me. Hi, son. Congratulations. Thanks. I took the bag from my purse. Here, I knitted this. Took me 3 months. I made it just for Matthew. He took the bag without even looking inside. Thanks, Mom. But now is not the best time. Why? Victoria is tired after the delivery. He wants some quiet. Only with the closest people. Those words cut like a knife. With the closest people? I repeated. Then who am I? He looked away. Mom, don't start. Just give us a few days. We'll call you ourselves. Andrew, I traveled all night. I just want to see my grandson. 1 minute. To hold him. He shook his head. Victoria is against it. She's having a hard time right now. She doesn't want to see. He paused. See whom? I asked softly. Say it. Strangers. Strangers. That's what I had become. I stood there looking at my son. At the boy I had raised alone. The boy I had worked 2 jobs for, gone without sleep for, gone without food for. The boy for whom I had sacrificed everything for 28 years. And now he stood in front of me and called me a stranger. Andrew, I whispered. Do you understand what you're saying? Mom, please. Don't make a scene. Go home, we'll call you. In a week, maybe 2. I promise. He wasn't looking at me. He was embarrassed, I could see it. But he wasn't going to change his decision. Because Victoria had spoken. And her word mattered more to him now than anything else. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake him until he woke up. I wanted to tell him everything I had kept inside for years. About the pain, the humiliation, the loyalty he had crushed. But I did nothing. I just nodded, turned around, and walked toward the exit. I reached the end of the hallway and, behind the corner where no one could see, leaned against the wall. My legs gave out and I slid onto the floor. Straight onto the cold hospital tiles. And I burst into tears. I cried the way I hadn't cried since the day Robert died. I cried from hurt, from pain, from helplessness. From the realization that I had given my entire life to my son, and he had thrown me out of his like something used and unwanted. People walked by, nurses, visitors. Someone stopped and asked if everything was all right. I nodded without looking up. Everything all right. Nothing was all right. When the tears finally stopped, I stood up, washed my face, and walked out of the hospital. The sun was shining, birds were singing, the city was living its usual life. And inside me there was emptiness. Cold, black emptiness. I went to the bus station and bought a ticket for the next bus home. I sat by the window and stared into nothing the whole way. I didn't cry anymore. I had no tears left. I just sat and thought, what had I done wrong? Or had I made a mistake? Maybe I had given too much. Maybe I should have lived my own life instead of dissolving myself in his? Or maybe the problem wasn't me, but the woman who had taken my son away? There were no answers. At home, I lay down on the bed and stayed there until evening. I didn't eat, didn't drink. Just lay there staring at the ceiling. The phone stayed silent. Andrew didn't call. A week passed, then 2, then 3. Nothing. I stopped writing. Stopped calling. What was the point of knocking on a door that had been shut in my face? And then Andrew called. Mom, hi. His voice sounded guilty, careful. How are you? I stayed silent. Mom, are you there? I'm here, I said. What do you want? He hesitated, clearly not expecting that tone. I wanted, well, you can come. To see Matthew. I let out a dry laugh. Did Victoria give permission? Mom, don't start. I'm asking you to come. You wanted to see your grandson. I had wanted to. 3 weeks ago when I stood in that hallway begging for 1 minute. But now, something inside me had broken. So I said, when? On Saturday. Just for a day, okay? Victoria hasn't fully recovered yet. 1 day. After everything, 1 day. All right, I said. I'll come. On Saturday I was once again shaking in a bus on my way to New York City. Once again bringing gifts, the ones that hadn't fit last time. Once again hoping everything would be fine. Although some part of me already knew it wouldn't. They lived in a new residential complex on the outskirts of the city. The very one they had designed together. A beautiful building, gated security, underground parking. Expensive. Andrew met me at the entrance. He hugged me briefly and led me upstairs. Mom, please be quiet, all right? Matthew just fell asleep. All right. The apartment was clean, bright, and somehow sterile. No warmth, no personal touches. Designer renovation, expensive furniture. Everything in gray and white tones. Victoria was sitting on the couch with her phone in her hand. She looked up, nodded at me. Hello. Hello, Victoria. I tried to smile. How are you feeling? Fine. And she went right back to her phone. Andrew led me to the nursery. A small room, also gray and white, with an expensive crib and a pile of toys. And in the middle of all that, Matthew. Tiny, pink, with soft dark hair on his head. My breath caught. Hey, I whispered. Just be careful. I leaned over the crib and lifted my grandson. He was so light, so warm. He smelled of milk and something sweet, babyish. I held him close to my chest and felt tears welling up. Hello, little one, I whispered. I'm your grandma. He opened his eyes, looked at me, with that unfocused newborn gaze, and closed them again. I stood there holding him, afraid to move. I wanted to remember this moment forever. His smell, his warmth, the weight of him in my arms. But not even 5 minutes passed before Andrew walked into the room. Mom, put him down. If he wakes up, we'll never get him to sleep again. Just 1 more minute. Mom, please. I laid Matthew back into the crib. He didn't even stir. 5 minutes. That was all I was given. We returned to the living room. Victoria was still sitting on the couch. I took out the gifts. The tiny shirts, the toys, the blanket I hadn't been able to give last time. Here, this is for Matthew. I knitted the blanket myself. Victoria looked at the things with little interest. Thanks. But we already have everything. My mom bought a full set at a baby boutique. It's handmade, I said. Made with love. She shrugged and set the bag aside. Andrew fussed. Mom wants some tea? Sure. He went to the kitchen, leaving me alone with Victoria. The silence was heavy, uncomfortable. I tried to think of something to say, but my mind was empty. How did the delivery go? Finally asked. Fine. Was it difficult? Manageable. That was the whole conversation. Andrew brought tea. The 3 of us sat there in silence. I sipped from my cup and felt like a stranger in this home. An uninvited guest getting in the way. After half an hour, Andrew looked at the clock. Mom, Victoria's parents are coming soon. They want to visit Matthew. I understood the message. Yes, of course. I should go. He walked me to the door. On the threshold, I turned around. Can I come sometimes? At least occasionally. He hesitated. Mom, let's talk later. We'll figure it out. Andrew, I looked him in the eyes. Do you understand how I feel? He looked away. Mom, don't be dramatic. Everything is fine. No, I said. It's not fine. And I left. On the way home I kept thinking about what had happened. 5 minutes with my grandson. A cold reception from my daughter-in-law. A hurried goodbye to make room for the real grandmother. So that's my place in my son's life. Somewhere in the back, let in out of pity, pushed away at the first opportunity. After that visit I made a decision. No more humiliation. Enough. I didn't call Andrew. Didn't write. Didn't ask about my grandson. If they didn't need me, then I wouldn't force myself on them. The first days were hard. I caught myself reaching for the phone, to check whether he had written. I opened Victoria's social media page, looked at photos of Matthew. But then I forced myself to stop. I unfollowed her, deleted the bookmarks. Enough torturing my own heart. A week passed, then another. Andrew didn't call. He probably didn't even notice my silence. But one morning my phone finally rang. The number was unfamiliar, from New York. Hello. Hello, is this Helen Baker? A woman's voice, official. Yes, this is me. We're calling from the billing department of the maternity hospital. We have an outstanding balance for paid services. Your number is listed as the contact for payment. I froze. What balance? What services? A private room, additional monitoring, pediatrician services. The total amount is $500. Andrew Baker listed your number. $3,500. 2 of my paychecks. I went silent. Something rose inside my chest. Not hurt this time, but something else. Thought. Are you still there? The woman asked. Yes. I hear you. When will you be able to settle the balance? I took a deep breath. You know what? I said. I don't have a son by that name. And I'm not responsible for paying other people's bills. And I hung up. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But at the same time I felt a strange relief. As if I had taken off a heavy burden I had carried for years. I had said it out loud. I don't have a son. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't cry. That evening I sat in my kitchen for a long time thinking. About my life, my choices. I had given 28 years to Andrew. Worked myself into exhaustion, denied myself everything, lived only for him. And what did I get in return? Contempt, coldness, a seat in the third row. Maybe it wasn't Victoria's fault. Maybe it was mine. I had given too much and erased myself. My son had grown used to the idea that his mother was always there, always helping, always forgiving. And he stopped valuing me. But now everything would change. That day marked the beginning of my new life. I decided to live for myself, for the first time in many years. I started with small things. I bought myself a new dress, just because, not for a holiday. I went to the hair salon and got a haircut. I signed up for computer classes at the library, something I had wanted for a long time but kept putting off. At work, my coworker Melissa noticed the change. Helen, you look different. Did something happen? It did, I smiled. I decided to live. She didn't understand but nodded. Little by little I filled my life with new meaning. I began going for walks in the evenings, not sitting at home waiting for the phone to ring but going to the park, breathing the air. I got to know my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, an older woman living alone. We started drinking tea together, talking. She also had difficult relationships with her children. We understood each other without many words. I joined a choir at the community center. I had loved singing when I was young, but life had gotten in the way. Now why not? Rehearsals twice a week, concerts on holidays. I enjoyed it, singing and being around people. Months passed. Andrew didn't call. I didn't call either. Sometimes it hurt, especially when I saw grandmothers with their grandchildren outside. But I learned to live with that pain. It became part of me, like a scar that no longer hurts but reminds you of what once was. A year passed. Then a year and a half. I got used to my new life. To the quiet apartment, the free evenings, the absence of calls from my son. Had I made peace with it? Not exactly. I had accepted it. And then one evening when I returned from choir rehearsal, my phone rang. On the screen I saw a name I hadn't seen in over a year. Andrew. My heart skipped a beat, but I forced myself to stay calm. I picked up. Yes. Mom. His voice was strange. Horse lost. Mom, I need your help. Things are bad. Really bad. I was laid off. The company shut down, the project was frozen. I've been out of work for 3 months. I said nothing, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hang up. Another part was already packing bags. And Victoria, she's depressed. Badly. He barely gets out of bed. She doesn't eat, doesn't talk. The doctor prescribed medication, but it barely helps. She's fading. And Matthew? I asked. That's the thing. There's no one to stay with him. Her mom went to visit relatives for 2 months. Her sister has exams and practice. And I need to look for work, go to interviews. Mom, I can't handle it. I don't know what to do. A year ago I would have dropped everything and rushed to them immediately. I would have run to save them. But now, no. Something had changed in me during this year. I had learned to value myself. Andrew, I said calmly. You didn't call me for more than a year. You didn't wish me a happy birthday. You didn't ask if I was alive or healthy. And now you call because you need help. He stayed silent. I heard his breathing through the phone. Do you even understand how much it hurt? How I waited for your call every single day. Mom, I know. I'm guilty. I ruined everything. But right now, I truly have no one else to turn to. You're the only person who can help. I closed my eyes. I remembered him as a little boy, running to me with a scraped knee, falling asleep in my arms, telling me I was the best mom in the world. My son. No matter who he had become or what he had done, he was still mine. That bond couldn't be severed. All right, I said after a long pause. I'll come. The next day I was already in New York City. The whole way I wondered whether I was doing the right thing. Whether I was walking into the same trap again. But then I decided, I wasn't going for Andrew or Victoria. I was going for Matthew. For my grandson who wasn't guilty of anything. The apartment looked completely different from the last time. There was clutter everywhere, a pile of dirty dishes in the sink, baby clothes scattered on the floor. It smelled stale. Andrew looked worn out, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. He looked at least 10 years older. Matthew was sitting in a playpen, whimpering quietly. He was already a year and a half old, big with dark eyes, looking very much like his father. When he saw me, he fell silent and stared with curiosity. I picked him up and he calmed down, resting his head on my shoulder. Warm. Familiar. Where is Victoria? I asked. In the bedroom. She hasn't come out for 3 days. I nodded and got to work. I washed the dishes, scrubbed the stove, cooked a proper meal, real food, not frozen meals, soup and meat patties. I fed Matthew, bathed him and put him to sleep. Then I cleaned the apartment, washed the baby's clothes, hung everything up to dry. By evening the place was tidy, smelling of food and cleanliness. Andrew looked at me with a mix of gratitude and guilt. He didn't know where to look. Mom, thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you. Go to your interview tomorrow, I said. I can handle things here. On the 3rd day I finally decided to go to Victoria. I had been putting it off, but I couldn't anymore. She was lying in a dark room, the curtains drawn, facing the wall. Thin, pale, with tangled hair. Nothing like the confident beauty from the wedding photos. Before me lay a broken woman. Victoria, I said softly. I brought you some food. Chicken broth, it gives strength. She didn't answer. I set the bowl on the bedside table and sat on the edge of the bed. I paused to gather my thoughts. I know you don't like me. And honestly, I didn't like you much either all these years. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is that your son needs his mother. He's a year and a half old and he doesn't understand why his mom won't come out of the room. And your husband needs his wife. He's scared and overwhelmed even if he doesn't show it. She turned slowly. Her eyes were red and swollen, her gaze empty. You don't understand, she whispered. I'm a bad mother. I can't do it. Nothing works. Why would you think that? Because it's true. Matthew cries and I don't know what to do. I get angry at him. Sometimes I want to run out of the house and never come back. What kind of mother feels that? She began to cry, quietly, hopelessly. My mom, she's perfect. She always knew the right thing to do. Never raised her voice, never complained. And I'm not like her. I was afraid you'd judge me too. Compare me to her and find me lacking. Show me how worthless I am. So I kept my distance. It was easier to push you away than feel like a failure next to you. So that was it. All this time, not arrogance, not contempt. Fear. Just human fear of not being good enough. I took her cold hand into mine. Victoria, listen to me carefully. There are no perfect mothers. Your mom isn't perfect either. You just saw her already grown, experienced. When she was young, she was probably just as scared and confused. I made mistakes too, many. I got angry at Andrew when he didn't listen. I was so tired sometimes I wanted to scream. I dreamed of escaping motherhood for a day. That's normal. It doesn't make you a bad mother. Really? She looked at me with hope like a child. Really? You're not a bad mother. You're exhausted and unwell. You need help, and there's nothing shameful about that. What's shameful is refusing help when you're drowning. She stared at me and something in her eyes softened. The ice melted. I'm so sorry, she said at last. For everything. For the wedding where you sat in the third row. For the hospital when they didn't let you in. For all those years of silence. I was unfair. I'm no saint either, I said. I was hurt, angry, thought poorly of you. Let's just start over. Not from a clean slate. That's impossible. But differently. She nodded and, for the first time in our entire conversation, gave a faint smile. That evening Victoria came out of the room for the first time in a week. She ate the broth, took a shower, changed into clean clothes. Then she picked up Matthew. He wrapped his arms around her neck and said, "Mom." She burst into tears. But those were different tears. Alive ones. I stayed with them for a month and a half. I helped with Matthew, fed him, took him on walks, put him to sleep. I cooked, cleaned, did laundry. But the most important thing was simply being there. Just being there, and that turned out to be enough. Andrew found a new job. Not as prestigious as Urban Build Corporation, the salary was smaller, but it was stable. He brightened up, relaxed. Victoria began to come out of her depression. She started seeing a therapist, began taking properly prescribed medication. Every day her eyes had a bit more life in them. We talked a lot. About childhood, fears, motherhood. She turned out to be nothing like I'd imagined. Not cold or arrogant, but insecure, sensitive, terrified of not being good enough. We didn't become best friends, but we learned to understand each other. Before I left, the three of us were sitting in the kitchen. Matthew was asleep in his room. "Mom," Andrew said, "we've been thinking, maybe you could move in with us? For good. There's a room. You'd be close to your grandson." I shook my head. "No, son. Thank you, but no." "Why?" He seemed confused. "Because I have my own life. My job, my friends, my choir. I'm happy at home. I just learned how to live for myself, and I don't want to lose that again." "But we want you close. To make up for." "Andrew," I interrupted gently. "There's nothing to make up for. I don't want you to take me in out of guilt. I'll visit, I'll call, we'll talk on video. But living together, no. It's better for all of us this way." He didn't understand. But Victoria did. She looked at me with respect and nodded. "You're right, Mrs. Baker. That's the right thing." I returned home. To my apartment, my job, my friends, my choir. But now there was a connection between us. A real one, not decorative. Not perfect, with cracks, with memories of old wounds. But honest. And that was what mattered. Andrew calls almost every day now. Not out of obligation, I can hear it in his voice. He truly wants to know how I'm doing. Victoria sends photos and videos of Matthew. Sometimes we talk, casually, about little things. Last New Year they came to my place for the first time in all those years. We sat at the table, ate potato salad and oranges, watched old comedies. Matthew ran around the apartment, grabbed ornaments from the tree, called me Grandma Helen. And I was happy. Truly happy. It's imperfect happiness. With footnotes, with caution, with words left unsaid. But it's real. Do you know what I've learned over these years? Love is not dissolving yourself entirely in someone else. It's not tolerating humiliation and swallowing pain just to stay near someone at any cost. It's not sacrifice that leaves nothing of you. Real love is when you love without losing yourself. When you can say no and enough. When you respect your own boundaries as much as someone else's. When you give, but don't allow others to take endlessly. Sometimes you have to walk away for them to finally see you. Sometimes you have to let go for them to return. And if you're hurting right now, if you feel unwanted or betrayed, know this: it's not the end. It's the beginning. The beginning of a new life where you finally matter to yourself. If this story touched your heart and you want to help us continue sharing stories like this one, click the super thanks button. It's the little heart with a $sign under the video. Every time you do, you help us create stories that inspire and remind us of what truly matters. Thank you for staying until the end. Tell us in the comments which moment touched you the most. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss new stories. Hit the like button if you believe it's never too late to start respecting yourself. And before you go, watch the story we left here on the screen. We're sure it will make you think too.